Heal. As I've already been introduced, that's my name. Please, let's stay on the other first slide. Yes, that one. Thank you. I'm privileged and honored to be in this space, and I'm very humbled because I don't even know if we can do justice to this topic in this little time, but I'm going to try. I've been working in this space for the past 17 years. As they've already said, I head an organization that works with victims and survivors of sex trafficking. And just to start you on, I know we are talking about helping survivors heal, but I thought I would give you context because the context is important for all of us to understand how to help survivors. We can move to the next slide. The first part of the context I want to create is the legal framework, or what constitutes trafficking in persons or human trafficking. For us to constitute human trafficking is a transnational crime, and Uganda has a law, the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons, and it describes what this crime is. There must be an act, as you see on the screen, and there must be means, and there must be a purpose. And if you forget anything this evening, trafficking in persons is about exploitation. The major purpose for trafficking human beings is to exploit them. But for adults, the ingredients of the crime include the act, that is, you could recruit or transport or transfer, or harboring is about sheltering or receive a person. And trafficking to happen, a person does not have to move. Somebody can still be trafficked in the same household, in the same location without them moving. But then there are means that traffickers use, and sometimes they use threat, as you can see, use of force, coercion, abduction, fraud. For most Ugandans, you're familiar with deception, but also there's abuse of power or abuse of vulnerability. If you're taking care of a vulnerable person and you abuse their position of vulnerability, you abuse your position of power, or you give or receive payments or benefits, or what people know as debt bonding. Some of you have heard, I was told to pay $6,000, those kind of things. Those are the means. For purposes of exploitation, which include sexual exploitation, prostitution, forced labor, slavery, a removal of body organs, and the Ugandan law added harmful child labor, child marriage, and usually that term child marriage sounds like an oxymoron. A child cannot really be equated to marriage, but that's the issue, and also use in illicit activities. So if somebody, there's an act, there are means, and there's the purpose is exploitation. That constitutes
Have we lost Dr. Annette?
Yes, I think she's having a network challenge. Dr. Annette, can you hear us? See how she's still on.
Friends, as we continue to wait for Dr. Annette, we need even to prayerfully start considering that which we have heard, the act of trafficking. And this time we are being talked to us about human trafficking. And looking at the slide as we wait for Annette to come back, looking at that slide, I think there are many of us who might be even explicitly or implicitly participating in this act of human trafficking. Either we are participating through recruitment, some of us might be participating through transportation or transferring, some of us might be harboring those who are trafficking in our homes, or we are the ones receiving these people who are being trafficked. And the means that have been given to us, they are very clear. Sometimes these young people that are trafficked, sometimes when you are passing.
Excuse me, Professor.
Is she back?
Excuse me, Professor.
Yes, please.
Dr. Annette is logging in again with another device as Rehab Uganda. If you can,
she's there.
Host, please make her co-host. Rehab Uganda. Okay.
You can unmute, Dr. Annette.
I'm sorry about that. I'm working in Masaka this whole week. I hope you hear me clearly.
Yes,
now we can hear you.
Yes, we've been training police and prosecutors, and so power has gone off and I lost the Wi-Fi, but on my phone, I think we should be all right if you can hear me clearly. Should we proceed?
Kindly proceed.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I can hear you.
So I just wanted to make one point on that slide of what trafficking in persons is. So if it's an adult, you have to prove the act, the means, and the purpose, as I had said. But if it is a child, you don't have to prove the means. So many Ugandans can be found liable if you have a child, you're harboring a child, and you've given them harmful child labor, that can constitute child trafficking. Or if you're a parent and you conspire with other people and you marry off your child, there is the act and there is exploitation because a child shouldn't be married. That would constitute child trafficking. So it's important for us as helpers, as people who want to help these people, to understand what child trafficking is all about. The next slide is about how does sex trafficking happen? There is a progression in sex trafficking. Of course, there is the luring. That is when the perpetuator establishes a connection with a person, whether face-to-face or online. And I must say why I'm going through these things, because they are dynamics most people are not familiar with. But online sexual exploitation is on the increase. The soliciting, the luring is on the increase. And the intent is to get somebody into a relationship for the purpose of exploitation. But there's also a phrase we call grooming. Grooming is where you identify and fulfill the needs and dreams of the individual by showing them favors, and you can groom them, but the end point is going to be sex trafficking. Remember, we've said sex trafficking, somebody doesn't have to travel. We have many minors in prostitution. We've been doing this work for 17 years, and the youngest we ever had was about 7. But also we know that children are exploited even younger for all kinds of things, as I'll show you. Then there is isolation. So if somebody is lured, whether you're an adult or a child, and then you're groomed, eventually there are tactics to isolate you from loved ones. And you can be isolated by somebody telling you, oh yeah, they don't understand you. Yeah, for me, I understand you. Or you can be isolated that you have an opportunity and people don't wish you well, so you shouldn't tell them about the opportunity. Then of course, the manipulation starts. Sending mixed messages to you, claiming you owe them something. Remember, if you are groomed and you are given favors and you are promised heaven on earth, eventually those promises, people begin to manipulate you with them. There is also a trend where people use witchcraft and they tell them, oh, you will get blessings. Let's take you to the witch doctor and you engage in this kind of exploitation and you will get benefits. And so, but when you get into the situation of exploitation, then somebody begins to use those as threats that we took you to the witch doctor, so there will be curses. It's important as we help, because you asked me to present about helping, but many people don't understand the dynamics of trafficking. They don't understand the dynamics of sex trafficking. And sometimes we might do more harm than good if we do not address the issues very, very well. Then eventually the exploitation happens. That's where the commercial sexual acts begin to take place. So there is a progression, you're lured, you're groomed, you could be isolated emotionally or physically, manipulated, coerced, eventually blackmailed, intimidated, threatened, and then exploited. And then this cycle continues. Please, let's continue. It's important to know that the whole thing of sex trafficking, sometimes pornography is part of sex trafficking, children using child sex abuse images, and as parents here who are trying to help, many children today are sharing nude pictures. Many 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, once they get photos, they take nude pictures and send them to friends or boyfriends. It's very easy for these things to be intercepted or shared in ways that will cause manipulation, and eventually a person finds themselves entangled in a web. And the moment they start blackmailing you with this, you could find yourself in a trap. But also, you could be told that you'll earn money. And so there is a way children are also glamorizing celebrities, but also they are getting accustomed to a lot of indecent exposure. And you see, as you see those arrows, all these things can feed into the other, and all this tantamounts to sex trafficking. Okay, please, let's continue. I'm really summarizing because we don't have a lot of time. And then when we think about sex trafficking and trauma, many of you hear this word and sometimes it's loosely thrown around. Oh, I'm traumatized, I'm this, I'm the other. But it has been proved that women in commercial sex trafficking experience post-traumatic stress disorder at rates equivalent to veterans of combat war. So you can imagine, many people know about Vietnam. Every time people talk about PTSD, they think about Vietnam. But there is so much trauma in this world of sex trafficking. Please, let's continue. These are important for us to note because as you strive to help people, you need to understand. What are the effects of sex trafficking on children? I mean, it has devastating consequences, long-term physical and psychological trauma. Physical trauma, it's not strange to find people with broken limbs, bruised bodies. They've been kicked, they have injuries in strange places. And some of these injuries are long-lasting. Then psychological trauma, we'll continue to unpack a bit of that. Sexually transmitted infections. There is an infection called PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. There are so many people in sex trafficking that end up with pelvic inflammatory disease, and it's recurrent. And most of these infections are half-treated, ill-treated. If you're in a situation of exploitation, your perpetrators are not going to give you enough time to heal. Sometimes you might not access enough medication. And so these infections fester. Some of them are due to abortions and those kind of things. Of course, some struggle with substance use disorders. It's very difficult to remain in sex trafficking and remain sober. People tend to abuse all kinds of drugs and alcohol to just numb what is going on and to numb the traumatic experiences they're going through. Of course, we have unplanned pregnancies. I'm saying all this because you need to think about holistic ways of helping somebody heal. We have quite a number of girls and women, especially age 20 or even below, that have come through our programs and they don't know the fathers of their children. Some of them could know, but some don't. So there can be unplanned pregnancies. And sometimes the issue of unplanned pregnancy is mixed with social cultural beliefs that, okay, maybe let me have my children quickly before my, area for producing children. My reproductive organs are damaged by sex trafficking. So all kinds of things are at play right now when people are going through these things, and those can be very severe. Depression, suicide ideation. Suicide ideation is when you have ideas of suicide. You haven't committed, but you're thinking about it and maybe reflecting about it. Please, let's continue. Some of the other effects on children have to do with behavior. You could see it in their behavior. They could be disruptive, hyperactive or aggressive, non-compliant. They may repeat some of the behaviors, reenacting trauma that they've gone through as sexually abused children. They may touch other children sexually inappropriately. They may be obsessed with touching their private parts. Remember, sex is an appetite, and a child doesn't have to be a sinner, because for us, we're Christians in this context. Sometimes we think, oh, this child is a sinner, and the Sunday school teacher is doing enough, and we're praying enough. This has got nothing to do with the child thinking, oh, they are sinning, but they've been conditioned to touch these areas. And even for a child, the areas have been stimulated, and when the body is stimulated, it responds. When the body is hungry, it eats. When it's thirsty, it drinks. So it's important to understand how the body can be conditioned even when somebody is going through abuse. There could be inappropriate interest or knowledge of sexual acts or private parts of the body, and also inappropriate physical boundaries with other people. I remember us having a beneficiary come on the program, and then she came with her little child. That child was about to, but every male in trousers, she called him something. In the field, when we go, you find that the little children are quickly socialized to think that maybe if it's in a group of women and they see a man, they refer to the man as customer. Now, you might think that child is wasted, but that child just relates someone in trousers, a man, that's a customer, because the people in that world of commercial sexual exploitation refer to the people, the pimps or the buyers, who, I don't want to use the name we use because some people get offended. People have those names here, but if you don't understand this world, you might not understand me. So you'll find that sometimes they have inappropriate boundaries. That young child can go with anybody. There are no boundaries set. There is no safety. Please, let's continue. Sex trafficking for adults, loss of basic human rights, it's very dehumanizing. Sex trafficking is very dehumanizing. When people hear sex trafficking, they think people are actually always selling sex. But sometimes you can be made to do some of the most dehumanizing thing. I remember meeting clients whose buyer bought them 2 people and asked them to make piles of poo. And whoever made the biggest pile would be paid more. So it's very difficult for you to make poo when you don't want to. And so you could be harassed. All kinds of dehumanizing things can happen to you. Of course, there are loss of one's childhood. There are many adults we find in sex trafficking, but they didn't start as adults. And I'm talking about 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 35-year-olds. They didn't start as adults. And I also must say sex trafficking is no respecter of age. Sometimes we tend to be empathic to children, but even adults, exploitation is devastating no matter what age. It causes disruption in families, mental health challenges, anxiety, PTSD, depression, substance abuse. Please, let's continue. Trauma coming from sex trafficking, there's short-term and long-term. And as you can see, people might struggle eating, sleeping, attention, concentration. They are withdrawn or avoidance, fearful. All these things, I'm spelling them out because when we think about healing and helping, we must have this at the back of our mind. They may be re-experiencing flashbacks, aggression, struggles with relationships, partial memory. Many times sex trafficking victims or survivors have partial disclosure or piecemeal disclosure. They might tell a story today and break it disjointed, don't remember, or remember later. And so you might think this person I'm helping is lying. Last time they told me this, and now they are telling me this. But it's because of the impact of trauma. Of course, long term, there could be depression, anxiety, PTSD, all kinds of drug and alcohol problems, split personality. Split personality, we mean human beings were not wired to go through the dehumanizing acts of sex trafficking. So sometimes people split the personality because they started by protecting themselves. This Annette packs away the normal Annette and then adapts a new persona. And for some people, it really gets into what we call split personality. They are a totally different person in this setting, and the true them has to be recovered if you're going to help them to cope. Sometimes they might be violent. So as we move on, as we think about helping, let's go to the next slide. There are some things to consider. There are risk factors to consider. There are push and pull factors as you think about helping people. I'll start with individual risk factors. There's history of child abuse, neglect, or maltreatment. Children who have been sexually abused are more likely to be lured into sex trafficking. In fact, traffickers tell us, when you abuse your children, you give them to us. There is a way the human psyche operates. If a child is sexually abused and a trafficker promises them money for sex trafficking, they might reason, after all, people were taking it for free. Let me give it for money. And you must understand those risk factors. They are big. We have what we call complex trauma. We have chronic trauma. Children who have sexual abuse, child abuse, whether it's physical, whether it's sexual, they've had neglect, they've had maltreatment. By the time they get the effects of sex trafficking, they have piles and piles and piles of losses and grief and trauma that has been going on even before they get into the situation of sex trafficking, including adults. Then there is homelessness, runaways, or people who they belong to nobody. Those are very, very risky individual factors. And especially children now who have remained as child-headed households, parents die, nobody cares, they belong to nobody. And those are very susceptible. These days we have LGBT. If people have been exposed to LGBT, they are also very, very susceptible. A history of being in systems, whether it's the juvenile system, criminal justice system, foster care, but also institutions. We have a way we care for people or children, feeling like we can just throw peanuts at them because we are helping them. So many orphanages don't provide quality care. I know there is the issue of affordability and resources, but sometimes it's just an attitude. After all, I'm just helping you. When people go in institutional care that simply doesn't care, it actually exposes children more to abuse. Then when they exit, usually traffickers hang around orphanages. In many countries, when children exit the orphanage, they belong to nobody, but the perpetrators are ready for them. And then a lot of stigma and discrimination. People are more likely to be re-victimized and re-exploited if stigma is not dealt with. And that's why many sex trafficking survivors do not disclose, because the moment they disclose, they're thrown out. One of the things we found very difficult in our work, we thought rehabilitation would be difficult, but we've found that reintegration is harder. So somebody was in a setting, they got into sex trafficking, we have done rehabilitation, we are looking for placement, we are tracing family to place children, and no one wants them. No one wants them, no one wants to come anywhere near them. Or if somebody was trafficked out of the country and maybe the family thought they were making money, the moment they come back and say it was sex trafficking, everyone rejects them. And maybe they've been deported, or maybe we've repatriated them and they don't have as much money. So we discriminate and we stigmatize, which increases re-trafficking. We've seen many people return and get re-trafficked to other spaces. This evening itself, I was disheartened at about 5:30. We had a victim of sex trafficking at age 10. She had a baby by C-section. We've been with her, we've traced the mother. It's been a long journey. And last year we placed her back with her mother. They were 2, 10 and 12. We've been with them for over 6 years. We eventually got the mom, we prepared her, we reintegrated them. We continue to support them in school. And just this evening, the mother sent them to the border of Sudan. Over the weekend, they called out and she had sent one of them to the border of Sudan to work as a waitress, causing her to be susceptible again. So she called us, the young girl called us, and we've been able this evening to rescue. Our team went to the border of Sudan, South Sudan, and brought her back. So now we are perplexed. As I'm doing this call, we don't know what the next placement is going to look like if this is the kind of situation. So as you think about helping, think about re-victimization, think think re-exploitation, as we continue to see how we can help. Please move to the next slide. So helping survivors, we tend to want to take what we call a trauma-informed approach, trauma-informed care. That means you care with trauma in mind. We also adopt a victim-centered approach. What is a victim-centered approach or survivor-centered approach? It means that every survivor is unique. One size doesn't fit all. They come with unique needs, unique settings, unique levels of trauma. This is not the cookie cutter thing. So you design treatment plans and care plans depending on individuals' circumstances, levels of trauma, kinds of exploitation, and all that. And so you want to think about promoting emotional safety. And emotional safety is protected by how do you talk about them? Because they will hear the things you say about them. How do you describe them before people? What language, what narrative? But also, how are you managing the emotional, whether it's depression or hyperventilating, they are anxious, they are hypervigilant, they have the startle response. How do you manage emotional safety, confidentiality, privacy? Or do you keep telling everyone? One time, our girls on the program went to present at a church, and the person who introduced them said, "Oh, we have young girls here coming to sing for us, and they've been in sex trafficking." There was no, they told us when they came back, they wanted to die. They wanted to hide under the pews. Absolutely not aware of everything. So you've just exposed them. So we must think about emotional safety. We must restore choice and control, and I'll speak more into that. We must facilitate connection. People heal best in relationship, in community. There is a way we help that is detrimental. Many times we help without fully connecting with the people we help. And I know that fully connecting is very exhausting, but we've found that a relational model is the most healing model when you deal with people who have been devastated. And supporting their coping, we'll speak more into that. Responding to identity and context. The approach is to restore their identity. Their identity is not what happened to them. Their identity is not prostitution. Their identity is not sex trafficking. On our program, we want to anchor them, their identity in Christ. Other people have different approaches, but I'm speaking to an approach I know, because our aim is to build self-worth. Our aim is to anchor them in an unshakable place, because all other things are very shakeable, and it can be very difficult for them to be anchored. And then building their strengths because they have strengths. Please, let's continue. We have some principles, and these are principles, and you can work within these principles to do best practice, really. I've already mentioned ensuring safety and physical and emotional safety. When you work with a sex trafficking survivor, you want them to be in a safe place physically. Maybe you're getting them out of the sex trafficking situation. Maybe you're getting them out of exploitation. Some of the hardest cases to work with is when sexual exploitation is within the family, because sometimes you have no other family members. They have a whole family secret, and there are no family members who want to take on this person because they don't want to be liable. And so you might not find a physical place. And that's why we have shelters. That's why we have all these things. But people should best, heal in community, but sometimes communities are not so safe. And then Emotional safety, you want to find that you give them privacy and respect them. You want to provide some choice. Give them clear messages. Do not overpromise things you will not be able to do. Tell them what their rights are, but also give them responsibility. Don't just over pamper, because responsibility builds control and builds choice. Remember, situations of exploitation take away choice and they take away control. So you want a person to know that I can actually sweep this place, or I have a choice to eat posho or sweet potato. Simple choices. Some are not very big choices. Some are just simple choices. You start small as you build into bigger choices. And then making decisions with the individual, being collaborative, giving them a plan. Don't just do things on your own because you think they can't think. People have internal resource and you want to build into it. Trust. Trust is a big thing. And trust is built by consistency and healthy boundaries. Many people, when they're supporting others or vulnerable people, they tend to take away boundaries. Please establish your boundaries, whether you're a professional organization or you are a carer. Don't, for instance, when we're helping people, sometimes we border on exploiting them ourselves. So if you're helping them, again, have clear boundaries. What are they supporting you on? Are they your worker or they are not your worker? Are they a child or they are not a child? Have clear boundaries, be consistent. Remember, for sex trafficking survivors, trust has been broken so many times. And so rebuilding trust will mean you provide task clarity, you're consistent. If you say you'll come at 2, you'll come at 2. If you have an appointment at 3, you'll be there at 3. Because the moment you don't come, they're like, there they go again. They were pretending. Then the other thing is empowerment. Provide skills, train, educate, but also draw from the individual skills because you validate them. You build their worth by saying, what are you able to do? What do you know? Sometimes they are so broken, it feels like it's gold buried in soil, but our job is to remove the soil and show them the gold, and then they begin to thrive. Our last slide, because I want to take some questions, is about really what do we do? Basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, medical, substance treatment. Some of them have severe medical challenges and you're going to be treating maybe for a long time. We've had a survivor who came back, trafficked for the past 5 years. They've never left the place where they were locked up in a certain country. They were trafficked to one country, sex trafficking, and the day they arrived, they never left that apartment floor for 2 years. And the next time they ever got into the elevator to get into a car, they were put on a plane to another country. And there they stayed for 3 years. So when they came back, the trauma was severe. They had contracted HIV and they had not been on ARVs. So it's been a long journey of recovering the psyche, just getting them to walk outside the place and getting regular on their ARVs. And they're amazing, they're doing well. Some medical procedures might need surgeries. So they're not simple things and they are not hit and run. Then, of course, therapy. Therapy is vital. You could provide basic needs as you refer to a therapist to help with deep trauma that you might not be able to deal with. Peer support is important. I already said stable relationships, predictable. They don't have to be many, but they are sure, they are consistent because people heal in community. For us as Christians, prayer and prayer and prayer. And prayer for wisdom, prayer for guidance, prayer for healing. Not only just casting out demons, there is a place for that, but even prayer to encourage and rebuild the individual. Providing skills and employment, legal aid. Some of them need legal aid. Some of them are filing cases. Some of them you'll meet them maybe where they were taken in as criminals and you have to support that. Then we destigmatize to avoid re-traumatization. And we must master confidentiality. This is not a story for all your sisters and your brothers and your uncles. This is a place where you want to protect and provide safety by maintaining information And church people, we have this problem of testimonies. Please allow the people to testify. You need to understand that a sex trafficking victim has cycles. Sometimes when they still first come out of sex trafficking, they want to tell everybody because they are not in touch with their emotions. But the moment they get in touch with their true emotions, they begin to feel things they don't want to share their testimony. But if you do enough healing and support, then they want to share their testimony, but from a healed place. So let's please understand when testimony can be shared and when it shouldn't, and where we seek consent. And consent can be withdrawn anytime. They can say, no, I was going to testify in the 10 o'clock service, but I'm not testifying anymore. And that shouldn't mean we give you food. And one of the things we should stop tokenism when we are helping people. We tie certain things to the help we give. I think this is a space that requires you to know that you really, really need to be genuine if you want to help people heal and be well. And then advocate for, there's a slide that had to do with society and community. I skipped some of those risk factors, but one of the things in our society, we have normalized abusing children. And the more we have normalized sexual abuse of children, the more we are making our society vulnerable to exploitation. There are children, there are so many statistics, pregnancies in homes, in families, everywhere, indecent exposure. And the more society normalizes that, the higher the risks of exploitation. So friends, I want to end here and take some questions. There's no action that is too small. So please let's work together to provide the help and care. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Wow. So wonderful. Please join me to clap, send those digital claps, the flowers, everything you can to appreciate Dr. Kirabira for this wonderful presentation.